This week, we'll be discussing managing barriers to change. There are many situations in which a client will not progress as quickly as you would like them to. This week, we'll specifically be talking about potential barriers related to the client-social worker relationship and lack of motivation to change on the client's behalf. The first is relational reaction. So how clients and social workers react to one another. Part of that is considering the influence of how social workers perceive the clients. As unbiased as social workers try to be, some clients we are going to put more effort towards help more than others. And part of that has to do with how we perceive clients. So part of our perception is, do we perceive clients as being angry and hostile, or do we perceive clients as being friendly, cooperative, and open to change? Based on how we perceive clients, we may put more or less effort into working with them. If we perceive clients as cooperative, we may either put more effort in or less effort in. So for example, if we perceive clients as cooperative and working hard, we might not feel that we have to put in as much effort because this client is already being successful, they have skills, and they're moving forward. So in that situation, we might work less hard with them. However, we may also work more hard with clients we perceive as cooperative. If we have a better relationship with them, if our personalities get along better, we may want to see them succeed more. So in that situation, we may put in extra effort. However, on the flip side, the way we perceive clients as angry or hostile may also influence the amount of effort that we put in with them. So if we perceive clients as angry or hostile, we may not want to work with them. They're not someone that we want to spend a lot of time with, so we might put in less effort. However, we might recognize our biases and as a result, try extra hard to help them succeed. So we should be putting in the same amount of effort with all clients. However, based on our biases and our perceptions and our recognition of these biases and perceptions, we may put in varying levels of work. So your first lecture quiz question for this week is, how do social worker perceptions of clients influence the way we work with them? And the correct answer is that it may actually cause social workers to be more or less helpful to clients. It just is going to vary social worker to social worker and client to client. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be more or less helpful with them, but it is going to influence the amount of effort you put in various ways. The other thing to consider is personality clashes between social workers and clients. Some individuals, if your personalities go along really well together, then you're going to be able to form a closer relationship. It's going to be easier for you to build rapport. And by building rapport with that client, the client may then be more successful. And you may want to work with them. You may enjoy seeing them, and you may enjoy helping them progress. So you need to be aware of potential personality clashes. We all have individuals in life that we might not work as well with, that there's just individuals that, personality doesn't necessarily go hand in hand together. I mean, if you think about people that you're friends with, you're friends because you have personalities that align, versus people that you're not friends with, it may be because of personality clashes. However, we don't necessarily get to pick and choose our clients, especially not based on personality. So you need to be aware of how to work with individuals with varying personalities. And part of doing this is to be able to explore your own personal biases, your beliefs, your values in a way that is going to help reduce some of these negative dynamics. So if you believe that a client is not progressing and has either to do with a personality clash between the two of you or your perception of the client, these are some specific strategies you should be taking. The first is self-exploration. So being able to recognize your biases. Then self-awareness, being able to assess those biases and understand the influence that you're having. And finally, self-control. So being able to recognize the biases and not act upon them. So recognize that the way you may be interacting with the client has to do with a personality clash, and being able to walk into a session and not let those emotions get in the way. You know, social workers don't walk in blank slates. You know, we have our own biases. We have emotions that sometimes we project onto clients. And based on whether we like a client or not, we might treat them differently. So we need to be able to walk in as much blank slates as possible, control our emotions. When someone says something, we don't want to give them a large negative emotion, especially if that negative emotion is coming from a relationship challenge. Okay. So as social workers, we really need to be able to control our emotions. That is going to be really critical, because if we display strong negative emotions to clients, think about what that's telling clients. More than likely, they've had someone display that strong negative emotion in the past, and it's probably caused them some trauma and some hurt. So you need to be the person that's different, the person that's walking in, willing to listen, being open to what they tell you, and then being able to build rapport based on kind of that blank slate. When we think about personality, these are different personality groups classified based on the DISC assessment. So it's DISC. So it classifies individuals into 4 personalities: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And for class this week, you are going to complete a DISC assessment, and it's going to tell you where you fall in these different categories. The DISC assessment is online, and after you complete it, you will receive a report that looks like this. So I took this, my DISC style is a D/C apparently. And it will just kind of show you where you fall in the different categories. Keep in mind that the colors are different between the DISC assessment report that you're going to receive and these DISC profiles that I am presenting. The colors are different, but the categories are the same. So if you're a D/C, I'm a D/C. So then I'm falling within dominance and conscientiousness. I'm falling between those. So some things to consider this week is you're going to complete a DISC assessment. And then you need to think about, for people who have an opposite personality as yourself, how can you proceed with working with them? And to do that, you're going to review another document that is this DISC profiles. And it shows you, the DISC profiles will show you what these people's behaviors look like. Okay. And then it will also show you, how they act, what they're like in conflict, their preferred tasks, who they're comfortable with, their strengths. It's recognizing that when you're working with someone, you really do need to recognize your personality, so the way you interact with someone, and what is going to work best for this individual. Because just because it's going to work best for you doesn't mean it's going to work best for someone else. So on the last page of this, it shows how to adapt to different people in different situations. So it shows when you're working with someone in sales and service, but if we're thinking about social work, that's a service profession. So how you can work with them most effectively if they have a dominant personality style, influencing, steady, or conscientious. Because again, what's going to work well for one person isn't necessarily going to work well for someone else. So for example, if we look at the conscientious style, so I'm a D/C, so I'm strong in conscientiousness. Part of conscientiousness is practicality and logic. So for example, I am strongly motivated with research and data. And if I were working with a social worker, I would want to know if they were telling me to try meditation or try mindfulness, I would want to know what the research behind that is. That's what would influence me to actually engage in that behavior. But for someone else, that's who isn't in the conscientious style, that's not going to motivate them. That's not going to help move them forward. So you need to keep in mind, what's this person's personality and what's going to be most effective at moving them forward. So if they are in the steady style, okay, so developing trust, friendship, credibility is going to be most effective for them. So rather than jumping in with all of this random data and evidence to try to convince them to do mindfulness, having a more personal relationship, so kind of being more personal, more friendly, building that rapport is going to be extra important. So consider these different styles in how you would be able to work with a client who's in one of the opposite styles. So that is one of your other lecture quiz questions. So the first is considering the influence of this client. The second we'll get to in a minute. The third is, what is your DISC profile? So I'm looking for like the D/C or the I/S, whatever it might be, based on the profile assessment test that you're going to take. It's going to take you like 5 minutes. And then finally, consider an individual with the opposite DISC profile. How would you work with them? Okay, so how would you adapt to working with them? So if you were trying to motivate them to change a behavior, what specific techniques would you do considering this individual in particular? Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. On the other side of reasons that people might have barriers to changing, one might just be a lack of motivation. So this can result from if people are unaware that the behavior is problematic. So if, especially if we're thinking about like substance use, if someone doesn't think that their substance use has a negative effect, they're not going to be motivated to change. Or if they have feelings of hopelessness, so if they haven't been able to change in the past, if they haven't been successful changing in the past, then they may also have a lack of motivation to change. And we are going to spend, in a few weeks, we're going to spend significant time talking about change and enhancing motivation. Today, we're just going to be talking about one tool in particular that you can use to kind of move clients forward who might not have the necessary motivation that may result from their lack of awareness or feelings of helplessness. So what we're going to be discussing is a tool called confrontation. So confrontation has some really negative connotations associated with. So I think when people hear confrontation, they think of it as very aggressive and having, directing anger towards people, but that's not what confrontation is. So confrontation is simply a tool to kind of take clients who might not be progressing forward and help them recognize how their current behavior is really not in line with their goal. Okay, so if a client says that they want to reduce their substance use and they don't follow through on certain tasks, helping them recognize how that's going to impact them in the long term. So the two types of confrontation are self-confrontation and assertive confrontation. So self-confrontation is it's not nearly as direct. It's not that when we think of like aggression, it's not that way. It's helping people recognize on their own that their behaviors are really inconsistent with the goals that they have set for themselves. So if you're in a conversation with someone and they tell you that they engaged in a behavior that you feel is not helping them progress forward, different statements that you can make might be, let's stop and look at what you just said. So you just told me that you used substances last week. Can we talk about that a little more? I understand how you felt, but how did using substances make it better for you? So I understand that you were really stressed last week. Did using drugs actually make you less stressed? Okay. So it's trying to let the client figure it out on their own. You're using certain statements for the client to use their own self-awareness and self-discovery skills. And then finally, what you're saying seems inconsistent with what you want to achieve. How do you see it? So, what the behaviors that you're talking about, that doesn't seem really in line with your stated goal of reducing substances. Does that seem right to you? So a step up from self-confrontation is assertive confrontation. So this is much more direct. You're really calling the client out for their actions. Okay, so assertive confrontation has 4 very specific components to it. The first is you are discussing your concern for the client. So concern is always necessary because you want everything you say to be from a place of concern, because that will help eliminate client feelings of attack. The second is to describe the client's goal. So what is the stated agreed upon goal that the client and you have come up with? What's their inconsistent behavior? And what's the outcome, the negative outcome, if they continue with that negative behavior, okay? So this is kind of like a fill in the words. So let's say that you have a client who walks in, who's trying to regain custody of their kids. In order to regain custody of their kids, they have to attend parenting contracts. They have to attend parenting classes. And they tell you that they didn't attend their parenting class like they were supposed to. So the specific words that you might use in this situation might be, I'm concerned that because you want to regain custody of your kids, but your failure to attend parenting classes will break your contract with the court, and then you're not going to be able to get your kids back. So you are directly kind of stating to them how their current behavior is going to result in negative outcomes that are inconsistent with the stated goal. Okay, so they need to be able to understand you're making that link for them between what they just did and what the outcome is going to be, because they might not be able to visualize that on their own. So your second lecture quiz question for this week is you're going to get a very specific situation and what specific words would you use. So I'm looking for like one sentence that uses this template of I'm concerned because you want to have this goal, but the behavior you just did is likely to produce this consequence, okay? So the very specific words that you're going to use, write those in the lecture quiz. So assertive confrontation, I think for some people, they're not comfortable with assertive confrontation, but it is really important to help move a client forward. And you should be using it in specific situations. So this could include if there's a legal violation. So if they physically broke the law, you need to make sure they're not going to break the law again. And you need to point out that legal violation to them. If they're in imminent harm to themselves or others, you should be using assertive confrontation. If the behavior is really blocking their progress. So in the situation with the parent not going to the parenting classes, it's not against the law that she didn't go to the parenting classes. She's not directly going to harm herself or others or immediately, but it's blocking her ability to make progress on her goal by not going to those parenting classes. Finally, a situation where you might use assertive confrontation is if self-confrontation didn't work. It might be that you started before you kind of called the mom out for not going to her parenting classes. You tried like, hey, so you just told me that you didn't go to your parenting classes. How do you think that's going to impact your ability to get your kids back? And if she's like, I don't think it's going to make a difference. No one really cares if I go to these parenting classes or not. Then you might throw in that assertive confrontation. Like, well, actually, I'm concerned that you didn't go to your parenting classes because that is in direct violation of the contract that you created with the court system. And then you may be unable to get your kids back. So if self-confrontation doesn't work, try that first, but if it doesn't work, then you probably need to move to assertive confrontation. So if we're thinking about employing confrontation, again, the first is self-confrontation. So try to allow the client the opportunity to recognize for themselves why the behavior was not the best choice. So if people are able to recognize that on their own, they're going to be more open to listening to you. It's really important that you don't use confrontation a lot. Use it sparingly. If you're constantly calling people out on what they're doing, that's really going to hurt your ability to build rapport with clients. So you should use it in very specific situations when it's going to be most effective at moving the client forward. You should always follow it with empathy. Always, always, always. Follow it with empathy and deliver it with caring and concern. So if you're going to let the client be open to hearing you, because think about yourself, if someone's calling you out on something that you're doing, they're probably not going to be very open to listening. However, if you say it in a caring words and it's coming from a place of concern and you're following it with empathy, then they may be more open to hearing it. So if we're thinking about this mom who didn't attend her parenting classes. You start by saying, hey, I'm really concerned that you're not going to get your kids custody of your kids since you didn't go to these parenting classes. Like, I totally get why you were unable to attend the parenting classes, how it was hard for you to attend the parenting classes due to your lack of transportation. Like, I understand why this was hard for you, but I'm really concerned by you not going to the parenting classes. You're not going to get your kids back. So those are really key, that people know that you are doing this ultimately because you care about them. And people are going to be more open to listening if they truly believe that you care and that you're willing to help them. Some situations where you might avoid using confrontation, if you haven't built that rapport with the client, then you're not really going to be able to deliver it with caring and concern, because they're like, they don't really care about me and they don't really know me. So do they really care if I'm successful or not? And if the client's in an extreme emotional strain, don't be that straw that breaks the camel's back. Don't be that person that's going to really push them overboard. If they're like in really extreme emotional strain, if they're going through a major mental health crisis, confrontation is not the thing to do right now. You need to be working with clients who are really more at that baseline level. They're going to be more open to listening to what you have to say. So again, using confrontation can be really helpful to move clients forward if they seem to be blocked due to lack of motivation or some other reason. So it is a really good tool to use, but use it sparingly.